Deep under the ruined mining colony of Kellar-9, a secret lab hummed like a dying machine. The air smelled of metal, chemical dust, and old fear. Blue lights flickered over cold steel tables where tools lay in neat rows. Too sharp and too cruel for anything kind. In the center of the room, strapped to a heavy metal slab, lay a small alien girl no older than 10. Her skin glowed faintly with silver patterns every time she breathed, like living starlight trapped in a trembling shell. Her name was Leora, though the scientists never used it. To them, she was only Subject 42, a rare specimen worth more alive than dead. 5 alien researchers circled her, speaking softly as if she could not understand. "She must be dismantled alive," one whispered, tapping a datapad. "Her inner light organ loses power if removed post-mortem," another added casually. Their calm voices made the cruelty feel even worse. Leora heard every word, and tears rolled down her glowing cheeks. Her hands shook against the metal restraints, the straps too tight for such a small child. She whispered a weak plea, but no one cared. Above the lab, life on the colony continued like nothing was happening. Miners walked broken streets, traders shouted prices, and travelers hurried past dark alleys. No one knew that beneath their feet, a living child was about to be cut open for profit. But one person sensed something wrong, a human traveler named Rylan Cross, a former soldier looking for a quiet life, had stopped on Kellar-9 for repairs and a meal. He was tired, carrying a backpack and a mind full of old battles. He wanted silence, rest, anything but trouble. But fate had different plans. As Rylan walked through the old mining district, he heard a faint scream. It was so soft he almost thought it was the wind. But the scream came again, sharper, full of fear. Rylan paused, frowning. No one else reacted. People kept walking like they were trained to ignore pain. Rylan felt a cold spark in his chest. He had heard screams like that before on battlefields. From children trapped in war zones, his instincts refused to let him walk away. He followed the sound, step by step, until he reached a rusty metal door marked Restricted Sector. A guard sat outside. Half asleep, not expecting visitors, Rylan approached calmly. Asking what was inside, the guard grunted. "Old mining storage, nothing for you to see." But Rylan could hear faint crying behind the door. He thanked the guard, walked away for a moment, then slipped into a side alley. Minutes later, he climbed through a broken vent and dropped into a dark hallway beneath the colony. Down here, the air felt thick and heavy. Pipes rattled, shadows moved, and deep mechanical hums filled the narrow tunnels. Rylan followed the screams until he reached a glowing door with a biolock. He pressed his ear against it and heard terrified breathing on the other side. His jaw tightened. "Hang on, kid," he whispered. "I'm coming." Rylan was a soldier, and soldiers always had backup plans. He grabbed a loose metal pipe from the floor, jammed it under the control panel, and twisted with all his strength. The panel sparked violently, and the door slid open halfway. He slipped inside silently and stopped cold. He saw the girl on the table first, small, glowing, terrified. He saw the scientists lifting scanners and surgical blades, preparing to take her apart, piece by piece. Something inside Rylan snapped. He hadn't come here to be a hero. But heroes never plan their moments. They just act. The head scientist raised a long needle toward Leora's chest. Her eyes widened in terror. She tried to scream, but only a choked gasp escaped. Rylan stepped out of the shadows, voice thunderous. "Step away from her," the scientist froze. A human wasn't supposed to be here. A human wasn't supposed to know. And a human definitely wasn't supposed to care. Alarms immediately began blaring, red lights flashing across the lab. The automatic lockdown system activated, sealing the exits. But Ryland didn't care. He moved forward with calm, controlled fury. One scientist tried to protest, saying, "This child belongs to the research division." Ryland grabbed him by the collar and threw him aside like nothing. He freed Leora from the straps, his hands gentle despite the chaos. She shivered, staring up at him with glowing, frightened eyes. "You're safe now," he whispered. Lifting her into his arms, her small fingers clung to his shirt like lifelines. Behind him, more guards rushed into the room, shouting for him to put the girl down. Ryland turned, shielding her with his body. "No," he growled. "You're not taking her." The soldiers raised their weapons. But Ryland was already moving, sprinting toward the emergency exit as sparks burst overhead. The door slammed shut behind him just as a laser bolt hit the wall. He carried Leora through the dark corridors. Alarms echoing everywhere. The entire underground base was waking up. They wanted the girl, they wanted the light inside her. And they wanted Ryland dead for taking her, but Ryland had already made his choice. He would not abandon a child. Not again. With the girl in his arms and hunters closing in, he ran deeper into the maze of tunnels. The rescue had begun. The war had begun. And Ryland Cross was ready. Ryland ran through the dim metal hallway with the alien girl in his arms. The alarms kept screaming behind him, loud enough to shake the pipes above his head. Red warning lights flashed again and again, turning the corridor into a nightmare of shadows and color. Leora held on to him tightly, her small glowing fingers gripping his jacket like she was afraid to let go. Behind them, soldiers shouted orders, their boots pounding on the floor. "Seal the exits," someone yelled. "Don't let the human escape with the specimen." Ryland felt anger rise in his chest. Specimen, they didn't see her as a child. They saw her as a tool, a treasure, a body full of light that they wanted to carve open for profit. He turned a corner and kicked open a rusted service door. The room smelled of coolant and burning wires. Broken machinery lay scattered across the floor like the bones of old giants. "This way," Ryland whispered. Even though the girl couldn't walk yet, he moved fast, searching for any path that led out of the underground nightmare. Ahead, a maintenance elevator stood open, its lights flickering weakly. Ryland jumped inside and slammed the controls. The elevator jerked, groaned, and began climbing toward the surface. Leora trembled against him, her glowing skin pulsing softly. Are they going to find us?" she asked in a tiny voice. Ryland held her closer. "Not if I can help it." Halfway up, alarms blared again. The screen above the control panel flashed with red symbols. "Remote override activated." "What now?" Ryland muttered. The elevator suddenly stopped, jolting violently. Then it began moving down again, forced back toward the lab level. "They're pulling us back," Ryland said under his breath. He grabbed Leora tightly and kicked open the emergency hatch in the elevator ceiling. Above him was a narrow maintenance shaft filled with cables and dust. He lifted the girl first, then climbed up after her. The elevator continued sinking, empty now, returning like a metal coffin to the monsters waiting below. Ryland crawled through the tight shaft until he found another vent grate. He kicked it open and dropped into a long hallway that smelled of oil and old smoke. This time, quiet surrounded them. The alarms were distant, muffled by layers of rock and metal. For a moment, Ryland thought they were safe. For a moment, Leora breathed easier, her glow turning soft and steady. Then she froze, her eyes widened. "Someone is coming," she whispered, voice shaking. "How do you know?" Ryland asked. She pointed forward, her fingers trembling. "I can feel them." The dark ones? Ryland didn't understand, but he trusted her fear. He moved quickly, pushing through another door and stepping into a huge abandoned mining shaft. The room stretched for hundreds of meters. filled with broken rails, collapsed beams, and thick fog drifting from the ground. This was the dead zone. A maze of old tunnels where miners once worked, but now avoided because the machines inside sometimes moved on their own. Rylan knew the stories. He didn't care. Danger was already behind them. Whatever was inside the dead zone was still better than the hunters chasing them. He quietly set Leora down on the ground. She wobbled, nearly falling. Rylan caught her and held her steady. "You can walk," he said softly. "But stay close." She nodded nervously. They crossed the quiet tunnel, stepping around old mining carts and shattered tools. Some machines still sparked with life, even though they hadn't been used in years. The air buzzed with faint electrical energy. Leora's glow brightened as if reacting to it. Suddenly, a distant roar echoed through the tunnel. Not a machine, not a human, something else. Raylan crouched low, pulling Leora behind an overturned cart. The roar came again, louder, closer. Leora covered her ears. "They're here," she whispered. "The hunters." Rylan peeked over the metal. 3 hunters rode in on hoverbikes, their armor dark, their faces covered. These were not lab researchers. These were killers trained for tracking rare prey. One of them scanned the area with a glowing visor. "She's near," the hunter growled. "I can sense the light." Rylan's heart tightened. They were too fast, too many. But he wasn't leaving the girl behind. Not now, not ever. He lifted Leora again and began moving quietly along the shadows of the wall. But one of the hoverbikes turned sharply, its lights passing dangerously close. Rylan ran. The bike roared to life and chased him. Engines screaming through the fog. Leora suddenly clutched Rylan's shirt, her glow flickering rapidly. "Left," she gasped. "Go left now." Rylan didn't question. He turned sharply left and jumped behind a collapsed support beam. The hoverbike crashed into the rocks that Leora had sensed, exploding in a shower of sparks. The other hunters cursed and turned toward the blast. "How did he know?" one growled. "He didn't," another answered. "The child did." Rylan realized in that moment that Leora's glow was more than just light. It was a sense, an awareness, a living warning system. She could feel danger before it happened. "Can you sense a way out?" Rylan whispered. Breath shaking, Leora closed her eyes, her glow turning bright. "There," she said, pointing toward a cracked tunnel on the right. "It leads to the surface." Rylan nodded and sprinted toward it. The hunters opened fire, energy blasts tearing through the fog. Rylan shielded Leora with his own body, running as fast as he could. Explosions shook the tunnel behind them. One blast knocked Rylan sideways, almost making him fall. But he didn't stop. He kept running, pushing himself beyond his limits. They reached the cracked tunnel. Cold air rushed in, sunlight, faint but real, shone at the far end. "We made it," Rylan breathed. But Leora shook her head. "No. They're still coming, behind them." The hunters screamed their engines to full power. The real chase was just beginning. Rylan staggered into the cracked tunnel with Leora in his arms. Cold air rushed over them, carrying the dusty smell of the outside world. The faint sunlight ahead felt like hope, like freedom, like the first breath after drowning. But the hunters behind them did not slow down. Their engines roared like metal beasts ready to tear their prey apart. Rylan pushed himself forward, boots sliding on loose stone and broken ground. He could hear the hoverbikes closing in. The sound echoed like thunder rolling through the narrow walls. Leora kept her arms around his neck, glowing brighter with every second. Her small voice trembled as she whispered, "They won't stop. They never stop. We'll make them stop," Rylan said. Breathing hard, he wasn't sure how yet, but he wasn't letting fear control them. Not now, not after everything they survived. The tunnel opened into a massive cavern lit by thin cracks of sunlight piercing the ceiling. Ryland set Leora down gently behind a large stone. "Stay low," he whispered, pulling out a broken metal bar he'd grabbed earlier. It wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. The hunters burst into the cavern, 3 bikes forming a rough circle as they searched. Their armor glowed with red scatter lines moving across the stone. One of them growled, "The child is near." "I can feel the pulse of her light organ." Ryland clenched his jaw. These monsters talked about her like she wasn't even alive. He stepped out slowly, holding the metal bar like a spear. "You want her," Ryland said, voice cold. "You'll have to go through me." The hunters turned sharply, surprised to see a human standing against them alone. One laughed, a cruel metallic sound. "You protect a creature worth more than a starship," he said. "Why?" Ryland tightened his grip on the bar. "Because she's a child," he said in a steady voice. "Because none of you will touch her again." The hunters didn't understand. They only understood profit, power, and blood. They revved their engines, preparing to charge. Leora watched from behind the stone, shaking. Her glow flickered like a candle fighting against the wind. Her chest tightened with fear as she saw Ryland facing the armed hunters alone. Tears welled in her glowing eyes. She couldn't lose the only person who had ever protected her. As the hunters accelerated toward Ryland, she cried out, "Ryland, look out!" Her glow suddenly expanded, shimmering across the cavern like a burst of starlight. Ryland blinked as the world seemed to slow around him. The hunter's movements felt clearer, easier to predict. He dodged the first bike, slammed the metal bar into the second, and rolled across the ground. The glow around him pulsed, guiding him like invisible hands. Ryland realized something. Leora wasn't just glowing. She was helping him, protecting him, sharing her instinct with him. The hunters regrouped and circled again. Now angry, one shouted, "Stop using the girl's power against us." Ryland didn't care what they thought. He only cared about keeping her safe. He ran toward a line of broken mining rails, grabbed a loose iron beam, and held it ready. The hunters charged a second time, their bikes slicing through the dust. Ryland swung the beam and knocked one rider off his seat, sending him crashing against the cavern wall. Another fired a plasma shot that missed by inches, exploding the rock near Ryland's feet. Leora screamed when she saw the blast. Her glow surged again, brighter than before. The light traveled across the cavern, bending around Ryland like a shield. The remaining hunter cursed as his visor malfunctioned. Blinded by her energy, Ryland used the distraction, leaping onto the hunter's bike and kicking him off. The bike flipped over and crashed, sparks flying into the air. Silence slowly returned to the cavern, broken only by Leora's shaky breathing. Ryland rushed back to her, kneeling beside her. "You okay?" he whispered. She nodded weakly, but tears streamed down her cheeks. "I didn't want them to hurt you," she said softly. "I didn't want to be alone again." Ryland placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "You're not alone," he said. "Not anymore." Leora wiped her tears, her glow softening into gentle waves. She took a deep breath and said, "I need to tell you something." Ryland listened closely. "My people—" "We weren't just hunted," she whispered. "We were wiped out because of our light." She pointed to her chest, where her glow pulsed faintly through her skin. "This glow. It's not only power," she said. "It's life for us." She explained how her species once helped power starships, heal broken machines, and connect cities across galaxies. Their light was a gift, but others turned it into a weapon. The scientists in the lab weren't the first to try to harvest it. Her village was destroyed, her family taken, her people scattered and slaughtered. She was one of the last, maybe even the last. Ryland felt something heavy settle inside him. "Not fear, but responsibility, Leora," he said gently. "I won't let anyone hurt you again. Her small hand reached out and touched his. "You saved me," she whispered, when no one else would, but the danger wasn't gone. Not yet. A faint beeping echoed from deeper in the cavern. Rylan looked down and saw a blinking red light attached to Leora's ankle, hidden beneath her torn clothes. A tracking beacon. The lab had put it on her. They knew exactly where she was, and they were coming. Rylan lifted her into his arms again. "We have to move," he said, voice firm. "Right now," Leora nodded, fear returning to her glowing eyes. The sun waited outside the cavern, but so did the next wave of hunters. Their true escape had not even begun. Rylan carried Leora out of the cavern and into the open air. The sunlight was weak, filtered through dusty clouds, but it still felt like freedom after the darkness below. Leora blinked at the sky, her glow soft and tired. For a moment, she almost believed they were safe, but the blinking red light on her ankle reminded them both of the truth. The tracking beacon pulsed again, slow and steady. Each pulse was a message sent across the wasteland. Each pulse was a signal calling hunters to their exact location. Rylan set her down on a flat rock and knelt beside her. "We need to remove this," he said, keeping his voice calm. Leora nodded. Though fear trembling in her glowing eyes, Rylan pulled out a small tool from his pocket. A leftover from fixing ships and machines. He tried to pry the beacon off gently, but it sparked violently, making Leora flinch. "It hurts," she whispered, holding his arm. "Just a little more," Rylan murmured, trying not to damage her skin before he could finish. A deep engine roar echoed across the canyon. Rylan looked up sharply. Dust clouds rose in the distance, growing larger every second. Hunters, many more than before. Leora grabbed his sleeve. "They're coming," she cried. Rylan's eyes narrowed. "Then we run," he said, lifting her again. He sprinted across the rocky ground toward a narrow path between two cliffs. Behind them, hoverbikes thundered closer, engines screaming like predators on the hunt. They reached the path, the canyon walls rising high on both sides. The narrow ground made it impossible for many bikes to pass at once. But it also meant Rylan and Leora were trapped. One way forward, one way back, and the hunters controlled the back. Rylan kept running until he reached an old metal bridge stretched across a deep ravine. The bridge creaked under his weight, rusted and unstable. But it was the only way across. He ran halfway, then turned around, breathing hard. The hunters arrived at the edge of the bridge, forming a dark line of armored figures. Their leader stepped forward, helmet reflecting the sunlight. "Human," the leader said, voice metallic and cold. "Give us the girl, and you may live." Rylan held Leora behind him. "No," he replied. "Come and take her." The hunters exchanged looks. Surprised by his fearlessness, the leader slowly raised his hand. At his signal, dozens of weapons powered on. Glowing with deadly energy, Leora hid behind Rylan, trembling. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "This is all because of me." Rylan shook his head. "No," he said firmly. "This happened because they're monsters. Not because of you." The hunters charged forward. Rylan grabbed a broken metal beam lying on the bridge and held it like a sword. The first hunter reached him. Swinging a blade, Rylan blocked the strike. Sparks flying as metal hit metal. He pushed the hunter back with all his strength, sending him crashing into the railing. The second hunter attacked from the side. Rylan dodged, barely avoiding a slash meant to cut him in half. The bridge shook under the fighting. Rusted bolts snapped, metal groaned. They didn't have much time before it collapsed. Leora cried out. Her glow suddenly brightened. Lighting the entire bridge, Rylan felt a sudden rush of energy move around him. Her light guided him again, helping him feel every attack before it came. He dodged, blocked, and countered with impossible timing. The hunters grew frustrated, confused, furious finally. One hunter fired a plasma blast at Rylan. Liara screamed, her glow exploded outward. Forming a shimmering shield around them, the plasma bolt hit the shield and scattered into harmless sparks. The hunters froze, stunned. No child should have that kind of power. The leader shouted, "Take her alive. Kill the human." All the hunters rushed the bridge at once. Their weight made the old metal groan louder. Cracks formed along the rusted support beams. Rylan saw the bridge beginning to break. He looked at Liara, then at the cliff on the far side. "Hold on," he said, grabbing her tightly. She clung to him. Trusting him completely, Raylan made a desperate sprint toward the other side of the bridge. Behind him, the hunters chased, firing and shouting. The bridge shook like it was tearing apart, inch by inch. One section collapsed, sending two hunters plunging into the ravine. Rylan reached the final step just as the last bolt snapped. He jumped, landing hard on the rocky ground with Liara in his arms. Behind them, the entire bridge collapsed in a roaring crash. Hunters fell, metal broke, dust exploded into the air. Silence followed, heavy and cold. Rylan stood up slowly, still holding the trembling child. Liara looked back at the fallen bridge, tears in her glowing eyes. "They won't stop," she whispered. Rylan nodded, breath heavy. "No," he said. "But neither will we." He carried her away from the wreckage. Deeper into the canyon, they had survived the hunters. But the commander who started all of this was still out there, and he would not let them escape easily. Their hardest battle was still ahead, but Rylan was ready. And Liara's light was growing stronger. Together, they walked toward the next fight. Together, they walked toward hope. Rylan carried Liara through the canyon until the ground leveled out and the sky opened wider above them. The sun was setting, turning the dusty horizon orange and gold. For the first time since escaping the lab, Liara breathed without shaking, but her glow remained dim, tired, and weak from the long fight. Raylan knew she needed safety, food, and medical care soon. He tightened his grip on her and continued toward the human outpost marked on his map. Hours passed as they crossed dry land, climbed sharp rocks, and followed fading old paths. Finally, they reached a hill overlooking a fortified human base, built from thick metal walls, tall towers, and bright floodlights. Rylan let out a slow breath. They had made it. Liara stared at the base in fear, unsure if humans would hurt her the same way others had. Rylan knelt down beside her and touched her shoulder gently. "You're safe now," he said. "I promise," and she believed him. They approached the gate, and two human guards stepped forward, raising their weapons. "Halt," one said sharply. "Identify yourself." Rylan lifted his hand slowly, showing he carried no weapon. "My name is Rylan Cross," he said. "I'm a former soldier, and this child needs help." The guards lowered their weapons as soon as they saw Liara's glowing skin. One of them gasped, whispering, "Is she one of the Lightborn?" Rylan nodded. "She was captured and tortured in a hidden lab under the colony," he said. "And hunters are chasing her." Within minutes, Liara was taken to the medical wing, surrounded by doctors and specialists who examined her with gentle care. Rylan waited outside, exhausted, sore, and bleeding from small wounds he hadn't even noticed until now. His arms and legs shook from the long fight, but his mind stayed focused on one thing: Liara's safety. Hours later, a doctor stepped out, smiling. "She's stable," the doctor said, "just frightened and very weak. But you saved her life." Raylan let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. He thanked the doctor and sat down, closing his eyes for a moment. News spread through the base quickly. A human soldier had rescued a rare Lightborn child. a species believed to be extinct for almost 100 years. Officers rushed to speak with Rylan, asking him what happened. He explained everything: the secret lab, the hunters, the glowing energy shields, the collapsing bridge, and the beacon still attached to her ankle. When the officers scanned the beacon, they found a signal still active. The commander of the lab was tracking her even now. The base went into lockdown, preparing for an attack. But something unexpected happened instead. A massive message appeared on the Galactic broadcast channels. The human government announced a reward for Rylan Cross. A reward for saving the last known child of the Lightborn. Medals, credits, protection. And something else. A full guardianship offer. They wanted Rylan to become her official protector if she chose him. When Rylan heard it, he didn't know how to react. He had never asked for anything. He had never wanted fame or attention. He only wanted to save a child because it was the right thing to do. Later that evening, Leora walked out of the medical room, wearing a soft blanket around her shoulders. Her glow was brighter now, calm and warm. She saw Rylan sitting on a bench and ran to him. He caught her gently, lifting her into his arms. "I knew you'd be okay," he said softly. She looked up at him with big glowing eyes. "Rylan." "They asked me something," she whispered. "What did they ask?" he said, brushing hair from her forehead. "They asked who I want to stay with," she said quietly. "They asked if I want a guardian." Rylan froze. Unsure of what she would say, Leora held his hands tightly. "I want to stay with you," she whispered. "You're the only one who cared. The only one who didn't want to hurt me." Raylan's chest tightened. He placed his forehead gently against hers. "I'll protect you," he said. "As long as I live." A loud alarm suddenly sounded through the base. Rylan stood up quickly, shielding Leora behind him out of instinct. But instead of an attack, a message flashed on the screen from the patrol ships. The enemy commander had been captured trying to escape the colony. He was found with stolen research files, illegal devices, and proof of the crimes committed in the lab. Liara's glow brightened when she heard the news. "He can't hurt anyone anymore," she whispered. Relief in her voice, Rylan nodded. "No," he said. "He never will again." The next day, the human government issued an official statement. The Lightborn are no longer extinct. Thanks to one human. Thanks to Rylan Cross. Reporters across the galaxy sent messages, wanting interviews, photos, and stories. But Rylan only cared about one thing. Keeping Leora safe, he accepted the guardianship, holding her hand as the approval went through. When the final signature appeared on the holoscreen, Leora hugged him tightly. "You're my family now," she whispered. Rylan closed his eyes and smiled. "And you're mine," he said quietly. The galaxy watched in shock. A rare glowing child saved. A hidden species rediscovered. And a human, just one human, who refused to walk away. Rylan Cross didn't become a hero because he wanted to. He became a hero because a crying child needed someone brave enough to listen. And that choice changed the fate of an entire species. Forever.